If you're a fan of horror, I think you have an ingrained animosity towards censorship. In the 80s and 90s, Americans saw the MPAA hack and slash their way through some of our favorite horror films, neutering away all of the blood, gore, and violence. In the UK, they took things up a notch and outright banned films with gory and violent content, making it illegal to own, rent, or sell films and arresting video store owners who rented out copies. This was the infamous Video Nasties list, and it's at the center of a fascinating new film called CENSOR. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. CENSOR is new on-demand digital download and in select theaters from Magnet. The director is Prano Bailey Bond, and it was written by Prano Bailey Bond and Anthony Fletcher. Enid, played by Naim Algar, is part of a UK film censor board in charge of watching horror films and listing what she finds to be offensive material. Taking place in the 80s, the media was filled with connections between violent crimes and the horror genre, and Enid believes she is doing the public a service, saving lives by editing away this horrible imagery from public consumption. But while she claims her work is heroic, she's really fueled by a dark trauma from her past that she only vaguely remembers when her sister went missing while the two of them played in the woods. After watching a film called Don't Go Into the Church, which contains a scene in the woods where a pair of girls are playing and one of them goes missing, Enid believes the actress in the scene, played by Sofia Laporta, is her long-lost sister Nina. Hearing that they're filming a sequel to Don't Go Into the Church nearby, Enid infiltrates the movie set in hopes to finally find her sister. Censor says a lot about a very fascinating subject. On the one hand, it's a criticism of the way the world lost their shit in the 80s, depicting the hysteria fueled by religious groups, the government, and the media who were desperately looking for a scapegoat to blame for the rise in violence in society. The film is filled with news reports and talking heads looking to pass blame on anything but the people themselves who did the crime. At the same time, it attempts to look deeper into the cause of this finger-pointing by putting a face on the censors with Enid, an uptight and regimented worker who never cracks as much of a smile and carries a large burden of guilt from her past that she cannot remember. Like the horror she snips from the films, Enid's brain has edited out what exactly happened in the woods that day with her sister all of those years ago. The irony here is that Enid is attempting to recover those memories, hanging on to the shred of hope that her sister is still alive, and the answer to her whereabouts are somewhere in her unconscious mind. It's not until Enid begins to delve into the dark world of underground horror film distribution and horror filmmaking that she begins to recover some of these memories. So instead of the horror hurting Enid, the very thing she is editing out is helping her solve this mystery. Now, this is a horror film, and things, of course, go sideways. One might say that all of those years of watching unedited horror films is what sets Enid off on a very dark path. But then again, it's the trauma from her childhood that is really the root cause, and while the constant inundation of graphic violence and gory imagery most likely didn't help, it becomes a chicken and the egg scenario with no real answer. Now, I firmly believe that film reflects life rather than influences it. Sure, there are rare instances where a crime is committed and the criminal blames it on a movie or a song, but those people were unstable in the first place, as unstable as Enid is depicted in CENSOR. Naim Algar commands every scene she's in with her tightly wrapped, thinly skinned demeanor and air of self-worth, quick to say her work is benefiting society. While she played a tough character in HBO's Raised by Wolves, Algar's Enid is downright ferocious in her belief that she is doing the right thing. It's this firm belief that she is right and virtuous that is her biggest flaw and makes her such a fascinating character to follow. Co-writers Prano Bailey Bond and Anthony Fisher don't hold back and take her on the darkest of paths which test her beliefs to the brink of her own sanity. This is a truly dark and winding tale they tell. Prano Bailey Bond also directed the film in a manner that makes it feel like the most vivid of giallos. The use of red filters throughout the more insidious scenes really illustrate the levels of hell Enid is falling into. In many ways, this film feels like a modernized version of Hardcore with George C. Scott, or the underappreciated 8mm with Nicolas Cage, as Enid's investigation leads her to a world that feels dark and dangerous in order to retrieve someone they have lost. Yes, this world of horror filmmaking is depicted in the darkest of light here, but at the same time, we're seeing it through the jaded lens of Enid's eyes. Either way, this is a film that gets danker and darker the longer you spend time with it, until the very end where Enid and the viewer are engulfed in a darkness that we cannot get out with all of our wits intact. The really profound part of Censor is that it is as relevant today as it was back in the 80s, with cancel culture and one-sided media outlets choosing bits and pieces to omit and include according to specific political or sociological belief systems. As righteous as she claims to be, Enid is biased in her job as censor, ranking all of the films she sees as rubbish. She's not a fan of horror and fails to see the art in it. Her little comments with her coworkers support this, and as a horror fan, it made it very hard to sympathize with her character. Worse yet, Enid has the righteous indignation to tamp it down and cut it out, thinking that her views are better than others with a different opinion. How is that any different from the social media outrage we hear on a daily basis? Like Enid, many are too ingrained in their own personal fight to self-reflect and see it for the biased and short-sighted viewpoint that it is. Even suggesting one's personal methodology might need some re-examination will be met by banning, name-calling, and even a spot on a modern nasty list. This would be a very interesting pairing to watch with the recent online revenge film, The Columnist, which I reviewed a few weeks ago, or even Promising Young Woman or Saint Maud for that matter, as all of these films feature a woman so ingrained in their own beliefs that she doesn't notice the damage she is doing to herself and others. While The Columnist depicts a more fairy tale resolution, Promising Young Woman and now Censor offer up a more nuanced take on the subject matter. Like The Columnist, where all of the online bullies are living in the same town, it's a bit of a coincidental contrivance that the sequel to Don't Go in the Woods is being filmed so close to where Enid lives, making her quest all the easier for her to achieve. Censor also takes its bloody time to get to the action, but manages to stay intriguing most of the way through because of Algar's performance and the occasional action/horror bits that pop up in the movies she reviews. If you were around in the 80s, you most likely have noticed some of the more annoying similarities between this era and that one. At times, I feel as if history is repeating itself all over again and nobody's learned from it. But maybe films like Censor, which depict modern issues, yet is set in the past, will somehow bridge that gap, and like all of the best horror movies, provide a moral lesson for us to learn from. And even if you don't want to or are unable to get to the deeper issues at play in Censor, there's some awesome blood, grue, and violence for all to enjoy. Censor is a film that delivers on all levels, providing character-rich, base entertainment with resonant themes that could fill textbooks. I highly recommend it for its layered delivery of controversial ideas, strong performances, and of course, the gory bits. What do you guys think of censorship in horror? Were you around during the 80s when it got completely out of hand? Do you think it'll ever get that way again? Let me know down in the comments. That'll be it for today. Please chime in down below in the comments and let me know how on the nose or mind-numbingly wrong I am, or you can counter with your own review. So guys, you know how YouTube works. I'd love to be able to dedicate more time to this channel. I'm not monetized yet, so if you want to help me out, remember to hit all the pertinent bells and whistles down below. Want some spooky comics to read? I have 2 new horror comic book trade paperbacks you should look out for. Both Gravetrancers and Pirouette, collecting never-before-published issues, can be found in only the finest of comic book shops. If you're looking for written reviews, you can find them on my website, mlmillerwrites.com. If you really want to show your support, I also have a Patreon page at mlmiller. Look for the link to my Patreon page down below. Thank you so much for your time, and take care.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're You're